Hey guys, it's me, Miss H. I am happily enjoying my trip at Disneyland, and I might miss you guys just a little bit, but maybe not. Rigo wanted a video, and so I'm making you guys a video. We are going to learn about Quadrant Trig today, and so thinking beyond the unit circle, so it's very similar to what we've been doing with the unit circle, but we're thinking bigger than the unit circle. So first thing I want to remind you of are our trig ratios. So sine is y over r, cosine x over r, tangent y over x, and then cosecant is the reciprocal, secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So r over y, r over x, and x over y. So all of that, you know that. That should be in your notes, but in case it's not, pause the video and put it in your notes. And so we're going to talk about some things, some points when they're not on the unit circle. Like, what do we do when it's not on the unit circle? Because everything we have, like, cool, great, we built this thing called the unit circle, but it doesn't do anything for us if the point is not, or if the radius of the circle is not 1. And so here, I'm going to give you a point. And so we know that a positive negative is going to give me something in the fourth quadrant. And so I know that I'm going 5 to the right and down 3. So 5, down 3, my point is approximately here. And so no matter which point I choose, anywhere in the coordinate plane, I can draw a right triangle, and I know the sides of the right triangle because of what's given to me. I know the coordinate. And so this coordinate is 5, negative 3. Well, if I know that it's a right triangle, I can find some other information out about it. It's a right triangle. I know how to solve for the sides of a right triangle if I'm given 2 of them. And so 5 and negative 3. So I have Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The legs of my right triangle are my a and b, so I have 5 squared plus negative 3 squared equals c squared, and so 25 plus 9 equals c squared, which is the square root of 34. And that is somewhere. That is 5.83. And so here, the radius is always going to be positive. So even though it's going in the downward direction, our radius is always positive. It doesn't have a positive or negative direction to it. So positive 5, negative 3, those can be positive or negative, but the radius of, or the hypotenuse or the radius, however you want to think about it, there's a circle here. All of that is positive. So now that we have all 3 sides of my triangle, I also know what the ratios would be for sine, what the ratio for cosine would be, and what the ratio for tangent would be. Cosecant, and this is my angle measure here. I just had the thought. So theta, since we're in the fourth quadrant, we're between 270 and 360. Secant and cotangent. So sine, we said earlier, was y over r. Well, my y value is negative 3, and my r value is 5.83. Cosine is x over r, and so this is 5 over 5.83. Tangent is y over x, and that would be negative 3 over 5. And so we can also figure out what the decimal value is for each one of these. So if we just divide it in the calculator, you can do this on your own. Negative 5.51, 0.86, negative 0.6, and then for cosecant it would be the reciprocals of these. So this would be 5.83 over negative 3, which would be negative 1.94. And Cosecant would be 5.83 over 5, and that's 1.17, and 5 over negative 3 would give me negative 1.67. So, being in the fourth quadrant, like, cool, great, we just wrote all of these trig functions for this particular right triangle, but what is the angle measure? How would we find the angle measure for this? Well, once you have y and x, the easiest way to do this is to come here, how to find the angle. Okay, inverse tangent, if we have y and x, really you can do inverse sine or inverse cosine or inverse tangent, but if we just kind of have this basic knowledge of this, it helps just to kind of like have a baseline. We're always going to do it this way. So inverse tangent of y over x equals theta. So here in the first quadrant, all of the calculator trig functions, sine, cosine, and tangent, all of them live in the first quadrant. So like if you're between 0 and 90, it's fine, because all of the right triangle trig that you did in geometry always was positive angle measures in the first quadrant. It was all right triangles. But tangent also lives in this quadrant, but all of the angle measures are between negative 90 and 0. So it's all the negative angle measures. So here's 90, and here's 0, and here's negative 90. So the calculator lives here. Well, that doesn't really help us if we're trying to find the positive angle measure here. So when we're in quadrant 2, we have to add 180, because we have to take it from this quadrant and add 180 to it. If we're in this quadrant, we have to take the first quadrant angle measure that the calculator is giving us and add 180 to it to move it to quadrant 3. And same thing here. We're in this quadrant, but it's a negative angle measure. So I'm basically going to go one more rotation around, add 360 to this, and that will give me the correct angle measure. So this basic idea needs to go in your notebook for sure. Definitely write this down. So this will help us find the angle measure. So then when we go back to here, if we do inverse tangent of the ratio, so inverse tangent of negative 3 over 5, inverse tangent of negative 3 over 5, that's going to give us an angle measure of negative 30.96, and then we have to add 360 to that. So then the final angle measure here, what this equals, is going to be 329.04 degrees. And so that makes sense because this is 270 and this is 360, and that angle measure is between those two values. So then other times, you can be given different pieces of information. So here we have tangent, and we've been given a ratio. And we've also been told that it's in quadrant 3. So if we know it's tangent, and we know it's in quadrant 3, we know this is y, and we know this is x, and we know it's in quadrant 3. Well, both numbers are positive. How can it be in quadrant 3? So if we know that it's in quadrant 3, we know this is the y value, we know this is the x value, we know this is 10, and we know this is 22. Problem, we're in quadrant 3, and both things are negative. Well, that should make sense to you, because if both things are negative, the whole value together will be positive. So be careful when you're drawing these right triangles on your assignment that you draw it, if you're drawing it in quadrant 2, that the x value is negative. If you're drawing it in quadrant 3, both values are negative. If you're in quadrant 4, the y value is negative. So just be careful about what is happening here. And remember that the radius is always positive. So if you have a negative value here and you have a radius, you know the radius cannot be negative. So just kind of keep those couple of things in mind. Well, we know it's negative 10, we know it's negative 22, and we know that we have a radius. Well, I'm not going to walk through all of this because we just did that, but you can write sine of theta, you can write cosine of theta, and you can write tangent of theta, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, you can write the fractions and you can write the decimals just like we did on the last problem. But first, you'll need to find this side. So remember, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And so this would be negative 10 squared plus negative 22. Don't forget your parentheses, equals c squared, and we can solve that equation. So just keep that in mind, that that's how we would work this, and then use all of the different things, y over r, x over r, y over x, and then the reciprocals for those. Okay, so that should be pretty straightforward there. The last one we're going to talk about is this. Okay, so I know that cosine is negative, and I know that sine is positive. So which quadrant does that occur in? Cosine is negative, sine is positive. Well, if I know this is x over r, and I know this is y over r can only be positive, so that means my x value is negative, but my y value is positive. So if it's positive and positive, it's a positive number. A negative and a positive is going to give me a negative number. So if x is negative and y is positive, I know that I am in quadrant 2. I know the x value is negative 15 because of my ratio. I know the radius is 21, and I know the y value is 14.7. Well, I already have 2 of my trig functions, and I can find the other 4, secant, cosecant, cotangent, and tangent. And then I can find the angle measure. So all of the process is the same. It's just thinking about the problem in a couple of different ways. Okay? Hopefully that helps. I'm having fun at Disneyland, and I hope you're doing your work for Miss Intrican. Bye, guys!